Before he died, I had the privilege of spending 50 days with Peter Drucker, the world's greatest authority on management. I was on his advisory board for 10 years. Peter Drucker taught me some wonderful lessons. One of the great lessons taught to me by Peter Drucker was this: we spend a lot of time helping leaders learn what to do. We do not spend enough time helping leaders learn what to stop. He said half of the leaders I meet, they don't need to learn what to do, they need to learn what to stop. Well, that one comment led to my book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There, which ended up being a bestseller in 12 countries and translated into 30 languages. So thank you, Peter Drucker. Now, how do you use what to stop in coaching and in leadership development? I was interviewed in the Harvard Business Review and asked a question. What is the number one problem of all of those successful people you've worked with over the years? What is the number one problem of all those executives that you've coached? And my answer was, winning too much. Now, what does that mean? If it's important, we want to win. Meaningful, win. Critical, win. Trivial, win. Not worth it? Win anyway. Winners love winning. It's incredibly difficult for smart, successful people not to constantly go through life winning. I'm going to give you a case study that almost all of my successful clients fail about winning too much. And I'm going to make a prediction. I will predict that you will fail this case study. And when I say fail, you will fail yourself. You will say what I did do is the opposite of what I know I should have done. Here is the case study. You want to go to dinner at restaurant X. Your husband, wife, friend, or partner wants to go to dinner at restaurant Y. You have a heated argument. You go to restaurant Y. It was not your choice. The food tastes awful. The service is terrible. Option A, critique the food. Point out our partner was wrong. This mistake could have been avoided had only he listened to me, me, me. Option B, shut up. Eat the stupid food, try to enjoy it, and have a nice evening. What would I do? What should I do? Almost all my clients, what would I do? Critique the food. What should I do? Shut up. Well, that was a negative example. I'm going to give you a case study now that is much worse. An example so bad that it makes the other one pale by comparison. Case study number 2. You have a hard day at work, a hard day. You go home. Your husband, wife, friend, or partner is there. The other person says, I had such a hard day today. I had such a tough day. And we reply, you had a hard day. You had a hard day. Do you have any idea what I had to put up with today? Do you think you had a hard day? We are so competitive, we have to prove we are more miserable than the people we live with. I gave this example at a class at Dartmouth's Tuck School. A young man in the back raised his hand and he said, I did that last week. I asked him what happened. He said, my wife looked at me. She said, honey, you just think you've had a hard day. It's not over. Well, the next time you start trying to win, take a deep breath and ask yourself a hard question. Exactly what am I winning? Now, I love getting emails. My email address is Marshall, M-A-R-S-H-A-L-L, at marshallgoldsmith.com. I love getting emails, and I recently got an email from a gentleman about this. He sent me an email and he said, I know you don't remember me, but I was in your class 5 years ago. I just wanted to send you an email and say thank you. He said, yesterday my wife called up and was talking about what a tough day she'd had. And I was just getting ready to point out how her problems paled in significance to my own. He said, for some reason, I remembered what you said 5 years ago. I stopped, I breathed, I listened to my wife, and I said, I love you. Thank you for all the sacrifices that you've made for our family. He said, I spent $25, I went home, I bought some flowers, and I said, I love you to my wife and gave her the flowers. He said, that was the best $25 I ever spent. Thank you very much. Well, again, next time we start trying to win and prove we're right, take a deep breath and ask a deep question. Exactly what am I winning here? What am I winning here? Adding too much value. Now, what does that mean? I'm young, smart, enthusiastic. I come to you with an idea. You think it's a great idea. Rather than just saying great idea, our natural tendency is to say, that's a nice idea, why don't you add this to it? The problem is the quality of the idea may go up 5%. My commitment to execute the idea may go down 50%. It's no longer my idea, now it's your idea. Effectiveness of execution is a function of A, what is the quality of the idea, times B, what's my commitment to make it work. We get so wrapped up trying to improve the quality this much, we may damage the commitment that much. One of my good coaching clients retired several years ago. His name J.P. Garnier. J.P. was the CEO of a very large drug company, GlaxoSmithKline. I asked J.P., what did you learn about leadership as the CEO of this huge company? He said, I learned a very hard lesson. He said, my suggestions become orders. He said, if they're smart, they're orders. If they're stupid, they're orders. If I want them to be orders, they are orders. And if I don't want them to be orders, they're orders anyway. For many years, I taught the new Admiral School for the United States Navy. What is the first thing I taught those new admirals? When you get those little stars, your suggestions become orders. Admirals don't make suggestions. If an admiral makes a suggestion, what's the response? Sir, yes, sir. That suggestion becomes an order. I asked my friend JP, what did you learn from me when I was your executive coach that helped you the most? He said, you taught me one lesson that helped me be a better leader and have a happier life. I asked him, what was that one lesson? He said, before I speak, stop and breathe and ask myself a question. Is it worth it? Is it worth it? And he said, 50% of the time as the CEO of this company, if I had that discipline to stop and breathe and ask myself, is it worth it? What did I decide? Am I right? Maybe. Is it worth it? No. How to avoid favoritism? You know, I've looked at leadership profiles from hundreds of companies, these profiles of how the companies want their leaders to behave, and they all look about the same. They all talk about ethics, values, integrity, people, quality, customers, all good stuff. There's one item I've never seen on any of those leadership profiles, though. It's an item every company says they do not want, and every leader says they do not want. Yet I see this puzzling behavior in the real world all the time. What is this puzzling behavior that everyone says they do not want, yet I see so often? It is called effectively sucks up to higher management. Every company says, we hate suck-ups. Every leader, I hate suck-ups. I have a puzzling question. If everyone in the world hates suck-ups so much, why does so much sucking up go on? Well, it goes on because we all tend to create an environment where people learn to suck up to us. Now, I know what you're thinking right now. You know what you're thinking? Yes, Marshall is making a good point. I see other leaders encourage suck-ups all the time. Not me, of course, but I see other bad leaders do this. You see this encouraging suck-ups and playing favorites? This is a problem that's very easy to see where in everybody else. It's just very difficult where to see in ourselves. Tough to see in me. Now, how do you look at this concept of favoritism? Well, you're sitting there thinking, I don't play favorites. I've asked thousands of people that I teach this question. How many of you own a dog that you love? Raise your hands, you dog lovers. And they'll all raise their hand. I say, what's your dog's name? They'll say, oh, Spot or Fido or Spiffy. Then I always ask a question. Which member of your family gets the most unqualified positive recognition? Would that be your husband, wife, or partner? Would it be your kids? Or would it be your dog? In almost every case, you know who the winner of that contest is? Well, that would be the dog. The dog. Then I say, do you really love your dog more than the other members of your family? And I go, oh, no. Everybody says they don't love the dog the most, yet the dog is a family member that gets the most unqualified recognition almost every time. So then I ask people, well, why the dog? They say, well, the dog does not talk back, and the dog doesn't judge me. And when I come home, that dog's happy to see me. And if I come home late, that dog is still happy. The dog is a suck-up. We all tend to reinforce people who reinforce us. Now, let me give you some guidelines on how to avoid playing favorites. Oh, and by the way, every time you get promoted in life, this sucking up to management trap, does it get smaller or does it get bigger? Oh, Miss Manager. Oh, Mr. Director. Oh, Miss Senior Vice President. Ooh, oh, Mr. CEO. Every time you get promoted, this trap gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, how can we avoid favoritism? Rank order your direct reports 4 ways. Number 1, how much do they like me? Now, you don't know how much they like you. What's important is, how much do you think they like you? You see, we all say we hate suck-ups. Do you know what we hate? We hate obvious suck-ups. We hate blatant suck-ups. We hate embarrassing suck-ups. We hate bad suck-ups. We like those good suck-ups that don't really look like they're sucking up. So number 1, how much do they like me? Number 2, how much are they like me? How much do they remind me of that ever so special me? A lot of people play favorites with people they don't even like. I see this in engineering companies all the time. It sounds like this. Yeah, he's a jerk, but he's an engineer. Fine person, not an engineer. What's the message? If you're not an engineer, you don't count. Or a salesperson, or a lawyer, or someone who reminds me of myself. Number 3, what is their contribution to our company and our customers? Which one of these people is giving the most positive contribution? And then number 4, how much positive personal recognition do I give them? And if we're honest with ourselves, in 15 to 20% of the cases, recognition is more highly correlated with 1 or 2 than it is with 3. And we might be falling into a trap we don't like in others. What is that trap? Teaching other people to suck up to us. So how do you avoid favoritism? Look in that mirror, challenge yourself, ask yourself these questions. Who is it that I like the most? Who is it that reminds me of myself? Who's making the contribution and who's getting the recognition? If we're honest with ourselves, you know what you start to realize? We can all fall into this trap. And every time you get promoted, everything I just taught you gets more and more and more important. I always ask a question in the classes that I teach. How many of you, given pressures of work and home and new technology that follows you everywhere and emails and voicemails and global competition, how many of you feel about as busy today and under as much pressure today as you felt in your whole lives? Almost everyone in the room raises their hand. We all feel busier today and under more pressure than almost ever. Now I'm going to give you a technique to help you save some time in this busy world and maybe increase your productivity. A question I've asked over 100,000 people. What % of all interpersonal communication time is spent on A, somebody talking about how smart, special, or wonderful they are, plus B, talking about how stupid, inept, bad somebody else is, or listening to somebody do that? How much of our lives are spent, again, A, we are talking about how smart, special, or wonderful we are, or listening to others brag about how smart they are, or B, talking about how dumb everybody else is, or listening to others do that? Well, again, I've asked this question to over 100,000 people from around the world. Give me a guess, between 0 and 100, what do you think the average number for the world is? The average number is right about 65%. 65% of all communication time is wasted on that. Now, I'm going to give you a productivity enhancement tool. It will improve productivity for yourself and for your teams. What is this productivity enhancement tool? Reduce that number. Reduce that number. 1, how much do I learn talking about how smart I am? Nothing. And how much do I learn listen to others do this? Nothing. How much do I learn talking about how dumb everybody else is? Nothing. And listening to that? Nothing. Reduce that number. I'm going to give you a totally counterintuitive tool to help people change behavior. This is called using small amounts of money to create large changes in behavior. Tiny little amounts of money to create large changes in behavior. Over the years, would you guess most of those big fancy people I've been coaching, you think they've been mostly women or perhaps men? That would be mostly men. Mostly younger or a tad older? Yep, a little bit older. And mostly poor people, or would they be rich people? Yes, mostly the rich. Let's tell the truth. Over the years, who's most of the people I've been coaching? A bunch of rich old men. I was teaching a class at Dartmouth. A woman raised her hand. She goes, "Any single ones?" Well, they're mostly a bunch of rich old men. Now, there's a common misperception about rich old men. What is it? A lot of people believe rich old men would not mind losing tiny little amounts of money. That would be wrong. Rich old men hate losing any money. Watch them play golf. They just can't stand losing. It is shocking how well this technique works. And I'm going to give you examples. The first one is called destructive comments. Those unnecessary, nasty little comments about our coworkers. Destructive comments. How many of you have ever heard a sermon that sounds like this before? We want to create an environment where people reach out across the company. Reach out. We want to build positive, synergistic, win-win relationships with our colleagues. Why do we like those silos? No, we must tear down those bad silos. Every company preaches this. What happens to all this corporate happy talk when we stab our colleagues in the back? Just make things better, a little bit worse. This is a bad, bad, bad habit. Now, I don't want to sound like I'm preaching at you. I also get feedback. And if you read my bio, you read all those fancy awards I won, well, I'm going to help you. None of those fancy awards came from my staff, and none of those awards came from my family. I'll never forget when my daughter Kelly was 14, she goes, Wall Street Journal, top 10 consultant in the world. She said, Daddy, I want to be in your field. I said, Kelly, that makes Daddy proud. Why do you want to be in my field? She said, the standards are low. Well, I'll never forget the first time I got feedback about myself from my own staff. One item was called avoids destructive comments about other people. What score did I make? 8 percentile, 8. 92% of the people in the world did better than me. And I wrote the test. I go back to my staff and say, staff, overall, I'm proud of my feedback. I feel good about this and this and this. There's something I want to do better. With that business of not bum rapping people. I teach everybody else not to do that. I said I've been one of the worst offenders. Then I got all gung-ho. I said, if you ever hear me make another destructive comment about a person or group, bring it to my attention. I'm going to pay you $10 because I'm going to break this terrible habit. Again, pep talk because I thought I'd be embarrassed to ask for the money. Pep talk wasn't needed. They tricked me into making nasty comments so they could pick up $10. I no more giving this pep talk to one of our clients called. He said, we need this and this and this. I said, he wants something you don't want to pay. It's cheap. $10. My partner Tim called. I said, that fool how to get a PhD. He doesn't know anything. $10. An hour later, $10. By noon, I've lost $50. Locked myself in the office and refused to speak to anyone for the rest of the day. First day, it cost me $50. Second day, it cost me $30. Third day, it cost me $10. Still cost me money? Yep. What score did I make on that one last time? 4.8 out of 5. What does this show? You spend a few $1,000, you start getting better. Well, as simple as this technique sounds, it works. One woman went to my class and she said, you know what? My teenagers are so negative. I'm going to implement this with my kids when I go home. They are so negative. $1 every time they make a bad comment and $10 for mommy and daddy. She sent me an email about 6 months later. The email said, you know what? I'm amazed at how much more positive my children have become. And then she said, I'm ashamed at how much money I have lost. She said, it became painfully obvious to me where were my children picking this up. She said, I was very good about hearing this destructive comment in my kids. Not nearly so good at hearing it in myself. Now, my personal coaching clients, I find them $20 for every sale. $20. These people are so rich, they drop $20 on the ground. It's not worth bending over to pick up. Most of them would rather die than lose $20. And the money all goes to charity. One guy, I'm going, $20, $40, $60. He goes, this is expensive. I said, you made $35 million last year. This $20 is going for a little handicapped child. Shut up. He said, you're right. I'm an ass. Take 50. Well, it's not the $20. It's the losing. One of my clients in India donated hundreds of millions of dollars to a charity. And Warren Buffett comes over, Bill Gates to India. He donated hundreds of millions of dollars for a good cause. He's a wonderful man. I'm coaching him a few days later. I find him $20 for every sin, and the money goes to the same charity. I'm going, $20, $40, $60. He goes, this is expensive. I said, excuse me, you just donated hundreds of millions of dollars to the same charity 2 days ago, and now you're complaining about $20. He looked at me and went, I forgot. I forgot. How do you forget donating hundreds of millions of bucks? Let me explain the difference. My friend donating hundreds of millions of dollars for a wonderful cause. You know what that's called? Winning. 20 bucks, losing. It is very hard for winners not to constantly go through life winning. Now, the next area I use this is no, but, however. A great thing to learn for stubborn people is never begin a sentence with no, but, or however. And I find my clients $20 every time they do that. If somebody looks at me and the first word of the mouth, no, what's the message? Shut up, you're wrong. What does but mean? Disregard everything you just said. No, but, or however. One of my clients is stubborn and opinionated. I'm reviewing his feedback report. He goes, but Marshall. I said, that's free. If you ever do that again, I'm going to fine you $20. He said, but Marshall, 20. No, 40. No. 60, 80, 100. He lost $420 in an hour and a half. At the end of the hour and a half, he said, thank you. I had no idea. I did that 21 times with throwing it in my face. How many times would I have done it had you not been throwing it in my face? 50 times, 100 times? No wonder people think I'm stubborn. No wonder people think I'm stubborn. He got so much better just learning this one very simple technique. What's the worst thing we can do when we recognize another person? That is great, but. Well, if you're a parent, get ready for some guilt. The kid comes home from school with a report card. Daddy, Mommy, look at my report card from school. 5 times I made the highest grade, and 1 time I made almost the highest grade. If we're not careful, what do we now say, Mommy and Daddy? That is great, but why didn't you make that high grade every time? You know what that kid is thinking? That is great, but why do I have a jerk like you for a father? Well, I love getting emails, and a gentleman sent me an email 2 days after my class, and he said, I just lived the That's Great But case study. He said, my son came home from school. In the United States, the highest grade's called an A, and the second highest is a B. And he said, my son had 5 A's and 1 B. And I remembered your talk, and he wrote, I looked at my son and I said, son, that's great. Daddy is proud. Then he wrote, my son sat there in silence. He continued, he said, I said again, son, that's great. Daddy is proud of you. Then he wrote, my son looked at me and asked, when are you going to start yelling at me? He said, I'm not going to yell at you. Daddy's proud of you. He said, my son was so happy. If we say that's great, but enough times to the people we love, you know, we teach them, there is no great. All there ever is but.